Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for internet technology professionals whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We are here to provide solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, this is Joanne Victoria with another episode of the Sanity Project podcast. The Sanity Project podcast is a platform for experts in the self-help community to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. We're very fortunate to have a number of different types of guests, and today our guest is Lauren Archer. Lauren Archer is an author, speaker, hypnotherapist, and health coach who helps people turn self-sabotage into self-mastery. As the Mindfulness Program Director for Sound Medical Weight Loss, she has developed a comprehensive patient education program called The Art of Mindful Weight Loss. Her book, 6 Word Lessons on Changing Habits, 100 Lessons to Stop Self-Sabotage and Gain Self-Mastery, is available on Amazon.com. She has authored and produced over a dozen self-help audio programs, including Awakening Fitness, The 7 Steps of Self-Hypnosis, and Hypnotic Journey to Weight Loss. And today, Lauren is going to be talking about transforming self-sabotage into self-mastery. Welcome, Lauren Archer.
Thank you, Joanne. It's such a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Well, I'm glad I found you on LinkedIn. It's interesting how the guests come to me in a variety of forms, some referrals, and you I just saw pop up, and I said, this is great, and she lives in Seattle. What more could be better?
How about it? In Seattle, which is the new technology hub of the world, kind of picking up where Silicon Valley left off. And
absolutely.
Lots of growth, lots of wonderful, new, innovative companies around here, aren't there?
And people can somewhat, it's all relative, of course, afford to live here easier than they can in Silicon Valley.
For now.
For now. Oh, God, I hope it doesn't catch up to Silicon Valley. I mean, your basic 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 50-year-old ranch goes for $1.5 million down there.
Yeah, okay. I guess we've got a little room to to catch up.
I'll take the room.
Yeah.
So how can you help our listeners with transforming self-sabotage into self-mastery, Lauren?
Well, self-sabotage is highly, highly individual, and yet it is rampant. Some of the most well-educated, successful, accomplished people that I have worked with, they're experts in nearly every area of their lives, and yet many of us have this underlying thing. There's something that we do that gets in our way, right? And we, quote unquote, sabotage ourselves. And obviously the rational part of our minds recognizes that, I really shouldn't be doing this. And yet many people have this disorienting dilemma, right? It's something that comes up for them that they can't seem to overcome. And so, in our conversation today, I'd love to just open the door to what that experience is like for people, what some of the things that I learned in my 25 plus years of study and practice about this phenomenon, and how self-sabotage can actually be a doorway to the most profound personal transformation and lead to a level of self-mastery that most people wouldn't get to without actually being willing to look at this.
Lauren, can you give people an idea of what self-sabotage really is and how they could recognize it?
Yeah, absolutely. Self-sabotage is when you say that you want to do something. So let's say it's changing a habit. Let's say it's moving forward on a project. Let's say it's writing a book. Let's say it's, eating healthier, exercising more, whatever it is. So you say that you want to do that, and the rational part of your mind sets that for a goal. And yet another part of you comes over and pulls you in a different direction, does almost the exact opposite. And it doesn't seem logical, it doesn't seem sensible, but you don't seem to be able to stop it. That is a typical pattern that I see in so many people. And it doesn't matter what your intelligence level is. It doesn't matter, you could be the CEO or the owner of a company, be doing just fantastic in your career, and yet you could be self-sabotaging your health or your relationships or your finances. Over shopping, gambling, those are also examples of self-sabotaging behaviors.
So is this ego or a subconscious thought that's embedded in our DNA or our brain?
Yeah, good question. The way I look at it is that we are multifaceted beings. So we all have an intellectual, rational part of our mind. We might think of that as the mental realm of our existence. And then we have a physical body, right? That's the physical. And then we have these slippery things called emotions. And that's embedded through the body and mind. And then we've got the fourth dimension, what we might call spirit or soul. And the way I look at that, especially in a clinical setting, I teach in a medical weight loss program and I speak at hospitals. So I need to stay evidence-based here. But the spirit that I refer to would be your individual sense of meaning and purpose and value. What is it that you define to be important and significant? And every individual gets to choose that for themselves. And that to me represents that spiritual aspect of being. So mind, body, emotion, spirit. Self-sabotage usually comes in where there's a disconnect, a lack of integration, right? So typically our intellect is going to define for ourselves a particular direction. Let's say, for a common experience for most people, let's say it's exercising on a regular basis. That's something most people can benefit from, say they want to do. And yet, if they're avoiding it for some reason, if they are getting it in their own way, or they're turning to food or alcohol or cigarettes or gambling or something like that, and going in the opposite direction, that's not an intellectual decision. That's typically something either in the emotions or there is a misalignment with their personal value system. They haven't quite integrated their reasons for wanting to follow that intellectual lead. And so the opportunity is to go deeper into the individual's psyche through questioning, through self-reflection. This is something people can do on their own. It's great if you can work with a coach, someone to help you through this process, and to pull back the veil, as it were. So one of my favorite quotes is, my mind is like a dark alley. I don't want to be left alone in there. And I just, when I heard that, I thought it was so funny. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to looking beneath the veil into those deeper levels of consciousness, into the emotional realms, the deeper feeling realms, even getting into the questioning of what are my core values, what is important to me. Once we pull back that layer that separates the conscious and the unconscious, people have a lot of fear of what they're going to find in there. There's shadows from childhood, and there are different, fears that we might have. So a lot of people are afraid to look at that. And yet, setting up a safe zone and with some structure in a way that people can view and pull up some of those hidden concepts and get clear on it, and then align mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, that's what helps us overcome it.
Well, it's interesting that you say, go back to your values, which is what I say, yet I always have this other person inside my head who is thinking while I am thinking, and listening at the same time. But when you said, to go back to your values, aligning that with what you want, and one of my values is to keep my word. And yet I don't keep my word to myself. This is me telling everybody out there who's listening regarding exercising, because there are days, I will have the excuse of, whatever, I don't feel well, I don't have enough time. Pick one. There are so many excuses because there's a certain routine that I have that I must do and should do and all of that stuff. And I can come up with the excuses, and if it's more than 2 days, that's my excuse. Well, if I've gone 2 days, what difference does another day make? And then it winds up being a week. So I'm in conflict with my own value of keeping my word.
So I just want to really compliment you for being open to share that. I have been in that situation too, and still, it's something. One of my teachers said, if you really want to learn something, teach it. And that, so I look at all these principles and it's like, I really want to learn this. And I am so willing to do what it takes. And the vulnerability. So it's so common. Even you, Joanne, you are this amazing life coach, well-accomplished author of lots of books. We all have our blind spots and we all have our areas where we can improve. That notion that you said about keeping your word to yourself is really important as well, because that is a phenomenon that happens over time, especially in self-sabotage. Keep in mind, I work with a lot of people who have overeating issues or over-drinking issues with food and with alcohol. And so when we say we're going to do something and then that emotional side, more that maybe primitive part of the brain takes over and gets involved in pulling us off track, we begin to break rapport with ourselves. We begin to not be able to trust ourselves when our words and our actions aren't lining up. And that costs a lot more than just the side effects of the self-sabotage, because what we're losing, we're losing that self-respect with ourselves, right? Oh, yeah. And I've
experienced that the past couple of weeks. I hate to interrupt, but that's my nature.
No, it's okay.
This is what has occurred because I have, again, this person who talks in my head, more than one, but they're all me. And, she's saying, you made a promise that you would do this. You committed to doing this and you didn't do this, and you're supposed to keep your word. And it's like, the inside of my stomach drops. I go through all sorts of, again, not all sorts, I'm going to sound dramatic, but I am. But I go through this whole process of being aware of letting myself down, which is not a good feeling for me anymore.
Yeah, and that to me is the core essence. I mean, obviously, getting in the right behavior and doing the things that we want to do for ourselves to make ourselves successful is great. But that relationship with oneself is so vital. And so I don't know how you feel about this. One of my teachers worked a lot with the concept of your word is law, right? And keeping your word to yourself. And so one way to do that is to just not make any promises that you're not going to keep. It's almost lowering that bar. Do not commit to something unless you are 100% certain you're going to do it.
Well, and how do you know that?
Well, so you begin rebuilding that relationship with yourself. So you just stop making all those promises, right? And you the only time you're going to make a promise then moving forward, let's say that we're in a process to repair that relationship, is you don't tell yourself I'm going to work out. You don't tell yourself I'm going to eat perfectly. I'm never going to have another bite of, cake again. You just don't ever make that promise.
Cake.
And you know what I mean? So you keep it, which, sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people who are, coaches and trying to get people into healthy habits. But if that rapport with oneself is broken, you need to begin by repairing that at a very fundamental level. So you stop making those lofty promises, and then you make little baby promises, little tiny things.
Okay.
It's like puppy training, you make the goal really easy and you follow through. So maybe you'll do 5 minutes of stretching, make that bar so low that you can definitely accomplish that. And then you start building back on that and build that up again. So just one strategy.
That's really important because that is what I've reverted to doing. Is I didn't realize I was making a baby promise to myself. I just said, you can do X number of these, Y number of those, and do all of this until that number is reached. And, at least you've kept your word. Of course, we go back and forth with planning for the future by deciding to, exercise every day and do X, Y, and Z, as well as living in the moment. So that's kind of a kinky little balance there. So how can an employee or a contractor or an IT pro use this self-mastery situation and not self-sabotage themselves at work? Now, we can keep this simple because my guess is that you're going to have to come back for another show, briefer show, but another show specifically on one topic of people being able to live in the moment and live in the now, quote unquote, and live in the relative future in order to be successful on the job and in their personal life, which is complex.
It is. It's very complex. Yeah. Sometimes I think I'm almost sabotaging myself by taking on this topic because it is so deep and the levels and the layers are very deep. And I guess in answer to your question, Joanna, I would say two things. Number one, be willing to feel into your body and to feel your feelings and notice what comes up. And there's, I do a whole couple of courses on the life cycle of an emotion and how to process emotions and how to put it in perspective and how to recognize, what your emotions are showing you about your values. Because if you didn't feel a particular emotion, it wouldn't be important. So if an emotion is coming up, it means that it's a red flag to something important. So being willing to feel that. Now, and the other thing, number two, is that there is a positive intention behind every behavior. Mm-hmm. That has been one of the most powerful presuppositions in my work. And obviously I didn't invent that, but the classic neuro-linguistic programming principle. But when we get into self-sabotage, and if we just take for a moment that presupposition that there is a positive intention, even though it may not be productive, it may not be, useful or helpful in your life, but when we start to feel into ourselves and lean in and go deep and be willing to let whatever's inside start to surface and inquire what could the possible positive intention be behind this self-sabotaging behavior. And, for many people, it's going to be safety or comfort or relief from pain, relief from stress. Maybe it's avoiding an unpleasant situation. Maybe it's trying to take a brain break. I mean, it could be any number of things that could be very useful. Some people are going to actually uncover a deep dissatisfaction with some aspect of their life. And when you get honest with yourself and you're willing to look at that, then you can begin making those changes. And a lot of times we stuff those kinds of thoughts and feelings aside because we have a belief that we can't change, that we're stuck in this particular situation, we're stuck in this particular role or job or relationship, and we can't change. But when self-sabotage comes up, if we're willing to look and listen and feel what is going on, what is it that I really want? What's the potential benefit of this? We may see that there are some things in our lives that we could change, and going through the process of change may require some effort. Mm-hmm. And yet it's all about being honest with yourself. So yeah, this is deep work, but it's I think, okay, so here's a metaphor. If you are sabotaging yourself, it's like you're keeping yourself in a very small little room, and the self-sabotaging behavior is the door. and you're bumping up against that door. And sometimes we bump up against it hard and it hurts. And yet we stay in that little room and we keep bumping up against the door. Crossing the threshold, being willing to open that door and go into what's beyond it requires courage. It's taking a risk. It's deepening. We don't know what's there. It's going into the unknown. And yet, when we're willing to look at it and get honest with ourselves and connect with our values and see what lessons are hidden or embedded in that self-sabotaging behavior and go to the other side, then that is where we find the greatest gift, the most the highest potential for us to achieve a level of self-mastery.
So do you ever have a question from anyone you're dealing with who says, fine, I'm giving up this, but I have a vacuum there. What if I do stop smoking, drinking, overeating, binging, keeping my word, whatever the issue is that people are self-sabotaging? What do you tell them is going to happen when they have this huge, for them, a vacuum, that there's something, nature abhors a vacuum. So what will happen then?
Well, I usually bring that up at the beginning. So it's very important to recognize that habits are not broken. They are replaced. And so the subconscious mind does not understand the negative. It doesn't understand not, so like it doesn't understand not smoking or not drinking or not overeating. So it is about replacement habits. It's also about becoming. It is about stepping into the embodiment of the kind of person that you choose to be on the other side. And how does that person choose to live in the absence of what was the self-sabotage? And so defining the positives, right? So maybe it's as simple as sitting down in the evening and noticing that you're in your favorite chair, you're looking around at your living room, your hands are in your lap and they feel just fine. They're empty and they feel just fine. And your mouth is empty and you're noticing the tongue on the inside of your mouth and feeling the sensations of being just satisfied, sensing that your body is comfortably digesting and that there is nothing outside of yourself that you need, that you have everything that you need within you, and that sense of well-being. So that is a something. Even though, you're not really doing anything, you are doing something. You're observing that, space of beingness.
You're acknowledging yourself. So you have any last words for our listeners? Today's last words. I would say that if you have experienced or if you're in the process of experiencing anything that you might label self-sabotage, to take heart, because it is and can be a doorway, and that there's help out there. And if you're willing to get honest with yourself and to look at those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and gain some information, that it can truly transform your life on the other side. That's great. Well, Lauren Archer is offering listeners, and I always save this until the end, a downloadable audio file called Inner Journey of Relaxation and Renewal. And you can get it at www.lauren, LAUREN-Archer, ARCHER.com/experience. Is that correct? Is that the correct link?
Yeah, Lauren? That is. Okay. Yep.
So if you go to that link, it'll also be in the show quotes, but I want you to know now, those who are listening, people see things in different ways, so we'll repeat that.
Lauren, I think it's a /.
Oh, whatever. I know. I don't even know why we have to say forward and back. I can't just say slash. If people don't know by now, it ain't going to happen.
I know.
And if there are those of you out there who want to also email Lauren because something sparked in your brain while you were listening, her best email address is Lauren Archer, LaurenArcher at live.com. Now, you as a listener can also help support Lauren's episode by going to iTunes and writing a beautiful review of her stunning performance here today. You can also give the Sanity IT Project podcast 5 stars. And you can also go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com. That's AskJoanne, Victoria as in the queen.com. And you can sign up to get a copy of my free book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. And what else can you get when you go there? Oh, just read and listen to all of the podcasts that are on there and my blog posts. I thank all of you for listening. This has been wonderful, and I thank Lauren Archer multiple times in one episode for her wonderful work here today, and thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com and continue the conversation on her podcast page. And get a free copy of her book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.